Okay, so we should be live here. This is what got cut off when I was in my car. And just really briefly, I want to tell you where we're at. So, we talked about all the results of the American Revolution. I guess the gist of all this is the states are setting up their own governments and they're outlawing things like slavery. They're having more religious liberty. British are on the frontier. Yes. But then we talked about the fact the Articles of Confederation had some real issues, and you can read those. We already talked about those. We looked at some foreign policy issues dealing with the British and the Spanish, cut off from New Orleans and the Mississippi, and the British are on the frontier, arming the Native Americans. Then one good thing under the Articles was a survey system and establishing the Northwest Territory. Great, we're in that right now. And then we last left off, we were going to talk about Native Americans getting kicked out of Ohio and Indiana. And without going into a ton of details, in the 1790s, the Miami tribe in Ohio is beaten by Mad Anthony Wayne in a battle of fallen timbers. They sign what's called the Treaty of Greenville, and the Miami of Ohio move out. Any of you sports fans, Miami of Ohio is a college, actually, named after the Miami tribe. Oddly enough, the bigger Miami in Florida is named after the Miami of Ohio tribe. So, kind of a weird geographic, I think, misnomer. So, Native Americans have been moved out of Ohio, and then by 1803, Ohio will be a state. So, essentially, once the British are gone, people pile into Ohio, and that was the fear that originally the French and the Indians, and later just the Native Americans, had. And it comes true. Americans keep expanding westward. Okay, let's get to a constitutional convention. There's some things that show some flaws in the Articles of Confederation. It's basically the fact that the federal government is not weak enough to deal with problems. So, first, 1783, there's the foundation of the quote, Society of Cincinnati. This was a collection of officers uh, who had been in the continental military, meaning they'd fought on the side of independence. And they're kind of this elite organization. And there was rumors that there was a conspiracy to have them do essentially a military takeover of the United States. Now, George Washington is going to get together his top officers and basically say, I know this is happening and you can't do it. And his strong response to this made sure the Newburgh conspiracy never came to fruition. It didn't end up happening. But these underlying things show that there is a fear that there could be an armed rebellion. After the war, there's a post-war depression. Sometimes during war, your economy rebounds a bit because of the demand for more food to feed soldiers. We have a massive debt, which drives down the value of our currency. We had a mess. And then the government also has no income tax and has a giant debt. So how do you pay off this giant sum of money that you owe to the Dutch, to the French, and to your own people who have lent you money via selling bonds? Now, in 1786, there was a convention called the Annapolis Convention, organized by Alexander Hamilton. For any of you familiar with the musical Hamilton, here he is. This is Hamilton. He's on the $10 bill today. This is another picture of Hamilton. A little trivia about Hamilton. He had been in Washington's military. He'd been an artillery officer. He had graduated from what is today Columbia University in New York. His mom was probably a prostitute, and he was from the Caribbean and had moved to America and had basically a wealthy benefactor saw him as a kid being super intelligent. So he's a rags to riches story. And oddly enough, he was a believer in a rule by a well-educated elite and a strong central government to keep things in order and promote the economy. So he calls this Annapolis Convention, where they try to talk about having several states get together on trade agreements. And eventually what they ask for is, hey, maybe we should have a convention to talk about the entire Constitution. The Annapolis Convention sets up a constitutional convention. Now, before that convention can get together, in the summer of 1787, a farmer in western Pennsylvania, Dan Shea, is going to organize a rebellion. Why? Because in western Pennsylvania, a lot of Revolutionary War veterans were losing their farms. They were in debt. They didn't have any income. They hadn't been paid enough as soldiers, and they're pissed. And they're having their property taken by essentially county sheriffs are seizing their properties. Like, why did I fight a revolution to avoid taxes when my own local government is taxing me out of my farm? So they rebel. They actually try to take out an armory at Springfield. Eventually, the rebellion gets put down, and it's a failure. I think Shea actually dies ending the rebellion. But it shows you that there is not a strong federal, meaning strong national response. It's just like the state has to put this thing down. And if we're going to keep having rebellions all the time, it's going to be chaos. And that does not create a strong country. Interestingly enough, Thomas Jefferson, at this point, wrote the Declaration of Independence. Thomas Jefferson is in France as our ambassador, and he ends up writing to one of his friends, and he says, quote, "A little rebellion now and then." And then to paraphrase, he says, "The tree of liberty must be watered with the blood of patriots and tyrants." So Jefferson actually thought rebelling every so often would keep things fresh and be good to keep democracy in order. I think he's in a minority opinion. Most people like a certain degree of order. We look at today's presidential election, even Trump saying law and order, that appeals to a lot of people. Now, we also have the idea of justice and protest, but stability also has a side. So, regardless. Now, the convention actually does take place. So, Shays' Rebellion makes it seem like, yeah, we should do this. So, every state sent representatives to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. They met at the State House there. The State House there is the exact same building that the Declaration of Independence had been signed in and ratified in. So this building is actually still there today in 2020. They have it set up as it was during the Constitution Convention. If you go there, it's 80% original, which I think is pretty incredible. Anyway, these are called the Founding Fathers, as are they often referred to. It's 55 guys. It's 55 white guys, disproportionately wealthy. A lot of them are slave owners. A lot of them are way above educated for the era. So it's a bunch of elite white guys. And I think it's kind of remarkable what they come up with, because this document is successful enough that it is still the backbone of the United States government. So for all of their flaws, what they come up with is workable enough that it is a model for a lot of other constitutions worldwide and is still functioning in the United States. Now, we've amended it, but they also built in that process. Let me give you some highlights here. James Madison is from Virginia. He is kind of considered the father of the Constitution. Here he is, short, slave owning Virginian, later president, lawyer. But he comes up with a lot of the mechanisms that are today in the Constitution that are both strengths, and some people would criticize some of the Constitution as weaknesses. But George Washington gives the convention stability. He is the former commander of U.S. military forces. He is now a civilian, but he is well respected, and he's a reluctant leader. Every time he gets asked to lead, he will do it, but he's a rare person who has a lot of power because people give it to him, not because he's seeking it. Most, I would argue, people who rise to his level are desperately seeking it. So whether you are Donald Trump or Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama, those people have big egos. Big egos. Washington maybe had a big ego, was not power hungry. And then Ben Franklin was the oldest at the convention. He was in his, I believe, low 80s. He had done a lot of stuff for America. He'd been a colonial representative to Parliament from Pennsylvania, meaning he'd gone there to talk to him. He was a representative, remember the whole taxation representation. But he had had a long role in organizing U.S. government. He'd been a postmaster general, been a whole bunch of things. So there he is. Ironically enough, one of his sons had been the loyalist governor of Virginia and of New Jersey, and ended up leaving America after the Revolutionary War. So his family gets split, which happens. Okay, so what happens at the convention? Well, immediately the convention agrees to throw out the Articles of Confederation. They're like, no, 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 it does not work. It is dysfunctional. We need to throw it out. With that, several of the delegates leave. So while it is, as I said on here, 55 guys, really it's probably more like 30 who are doing the regular negotiations. Now, one of the first principles they come up with is the idea of federalism. Federalism says that you're going to have a national government that can make rules. And some of these rules have to be followed by the states. But federalism also allows states to control some of their own things. Let me give you an example. States can set their own laws for driving cars today. So in some states, you can drive at the age of 14. There's no federal law that says you have to be 16 to drive a car. States can set their own voting rules. So in some states, you have to show an ID to vote. In other states, you do not. Wisconsin switched, maybe 8-10 years ago to say you have to show an ID at the polls. Now, you can argue about the pros and the cons of that, but states have some powers. Marriage laws. States can set what the marriage age is. Some states, with parental permission, you can get married at like the age of 12. Other states, you got to be 18. So it just depends. So it's trying to share power between the federal government and the state government. That's federalism. Government is from the people. So every position that exists in federal government is eventually somehow derived from people making a decision to elect people. We don't have a direct democracy. So we aren't voting on laws that come up and get proposed very often. So you all are not voting on the confirmation of a member of the Supreme Court. Members of Congress, specifically senators, vote on that, but the senators were voted by the people. Okay, going to separate powers. We're not going to have just one branch of government that controls everything. We're going to have the legislative body, which is Congress. Congress makes laws. Presidents don't make laws. Sometimes I think it's ridiculous when presidents say, I want to do this and this and this and this. And they can be a big cheerleader. They don't make laws. They can suggest laws, but they don't even have the right to literally put laws in Congress. They have to get someone to propose it for them. So the legislative branch makes laws. The executive branch carries those laws out. So every part of the federal government today was created by the legislative branch, whether it's the FBI, Department of Education, the Department of Transportation. All these things were created by the federal government, by the legislative branch, and now the president is the top guy. So like we have the Food and Drug Administration. That's in the executive branch. The president has ultimate say over how the FDA runs, but the FDA has to follow the rules established by Congress. And then finally, we have the judicial branch, which rules on how laws should be interpreted and are they constitutional. So those three branches. Are there some overlaps between them? Yes, but largely it's trying to have checks and balances. So not one branch rules. So if we just had a president who essentially was a dictator, they would be the judicial branch and the legislative branch and the executive branch. We don't have that. And most people today, Democrats, Republicans would say, yeah, that's a strength. That's a real strength. So today, if you're a Republican, you have the executive branch. That is a check on the House of Representatives, which is controlled by the Democrats. And then the Senate is also controlled by the Republicans, which also is a check on the House. And the Supreme Court right now is about to flip to be pretty conservative, and that could be a check on eventually a Democratic president. So check, check, check. If something gets done, it has to have a wide popularity in most cases. Okay, so there is a debate early on over how are we going to structure the federal government. And first off, Virginia comes up with a proposal. Virginia says we want a bicameral legislature. Bicameral meaning two houses. They want a House and a Senate, or at least what essentially becomes the House and the Senate. And they want representation in both based on population. Go figure, what state do you think has the most people? Oh, it's Virginia. So representation is based on population. What state's going to have the most impact? Virginia. So today, if we had followed the Virginia plan, Congress would be dominated by Texas, California, Florida, New York. Those big states would dominate lawmaking and small states wouldn't have much of a role. Well, New Jersey, which at the time is a small state, says no, 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 no. Or no, I don't know, New Jersey accent, imagine it. They want a unicameral legislature with each state having equal representation. Go figure, they're a small state. So Virginia would have the same number of representatives as would New Jersey or Rhode Island, or name a small state. Well, and they also think the government should regulate tax and regulate commerce, trade between states. So these are not exactly compatible plans. What do you do? And I think what they end up coming up with is really a fairly smart compromise to get the law passed or get the Constitution passed. They come up with what is called the Great Compromise. Great. So, and it's sometimes called the Connecticut Compromise, and a lot of it is come up with by James Madison behind the scenes. he'd come up with the Virginia plan, but here's what they come up with. So here's what we have today. Oops. We have a bicameral legislature, two houses. We have a House of Representatives. The House of Representatives is based on population. So Wisconsin currently has 10 members of the House. 10. Or is it 9? Oof, I got to double check that because I think we lost one in the last election. Anyway, we have roughly 10 members of the House. State of California has 50 plus members of the House. So the big states dominate. So if you're sitting in the House of Representatives, it currently has 435 members. Over 50 of them are from California. So if you want to find a California in the House of Representatives, it's easy. You want to find Wyoming's representative? They have one representative in the House of Representatives. So 1 in 435 members are from Wyoming. Their representation is they get elected every 2 years. They're almost constantly up for election. The House of Representatives is supposed to be more representative of the United States population. So today, coming up here in November, we are going to have an election for the House of Representatives. Mark Pocan is our current representative from where Stoughton is. Now, the Senate is a little more insulated. The Senate is going to have 2 senators per state, get a 6-year term. Much longer, much more stable. That means Wyoming gets 2 senators. Wyoming has 2 senators and 1 member of the House. California has the exact reverse. California has also 2 senators and over 50 members of the House. So each state has equal representation. This gives, I would argue, small states disproportionate representation in the Senate and big states representation, maybe too much representation in the House of Representatives. You can make your own conclusions on that one. Either way, the Senate does not have the whole Senate up for election because every 6 years they have it in a cycle of basically a third. So a third of all senators are up for election coming up here in November. 2 years from now, the next third and the next third. When the Congress was originally set up, the Senate was elected by members of state legislative bodies. So the Senate wasn't even originally elected by the people. It was elected by people who were elected by the people. So it's a little remote. Okay, kind of a real stain on the United States here. We wrote in a 3/5 compromise. 3/5 compromise says that slaves, when you're trying to figure out how many people live in your state, which tells you how much you'll get in the House of Representatives, each slave counts as 3/5 of a person. So a state like Virginia, which might have 100,000 slaves, that actually counts as 3/5 of 100,000. Oh boy, I should be able to do the math on this. So that would count as, is it 60,000, 65,000? It would count as 65,000 white people. So, and they don't use the word slave. They use the word, they don't even say non-citizen. They kind of dance around the word slave, but what it means is that slaves count kind of as people, but really there's still a debate as even if they're U.S. citizens, and the Constitution completely allows slavery, because if you try to outlaw slavery at this point, you're going to lose all the southern states who will not ratify the Constitution. And they get their slaves to count kind of as people towards representation, but they don't have to count them like as people who are actually voting. So, and that's still in the Constitution. If we ever overturn the 13th Amendment that outlaws slavery, and we had slaves would go back to counting. So we never got rid of that clause in the Constitution. Also, as sort of a compromise, slave trade will end in 1808. What I mean by slave trade, I really should have put down made foreign slave trade. So we're not going to bring in any new slaves from any place else. Any growth in the slave population after 1808 is people having babies, slaves having babies. And there is going to be a massive increase in population. And yes, there are some smuggled in. But overall, if you're African American today in the United States and you are the descendant of slaves, your family has been here since before 1808. Okay, legislative power. So the Congress, this Congress we just established, Congress is the House and the Senate, has the power to do a ton of things now. What can they do? Power to regulate commerce between states. They have the power to tax. So yeah, federal government can tax people, which they do. Right now, the largest single tax is the income tax, which there was actually an argument over whether that was constitutional. It's now in the Constitution. That comes a little later, but power to tax. So like they can tax alcohol if they want, which they will. Regulate commerce between states. So if you're going to send, I don't know, butter from Wisconsin to Illinois, that means the federal government will have the right to regulate butter, like it has to be fermented milk or whatever, or pasteurized milk. Government has the right to issue money. Government has the power to declare war. There's a necessary and proper clause, which is super vague. That pretty much allows Congress today to establish lots and lots of institutions that were probably never envisioned by the founders of the Constitution. But because the necessary and proper clause is so broad, Congress can do lots of things. So, like today, we have a Medicare program, a Medicaid program. So the federal government provides health care to poor people, and it provides health care to poor people. So poor and old people. That was never in the Constitution, but the necessary and proper clause is broad enough to say, yeah, we could do it. Senate has a few special powers. Senate can approve members of the Supreme Court. Senate basically approves any major executive officers. So someday, if you're going to be ambassador to England, you will have to get approved by the U.S. Senate. So the Senate kind of, I guess, guards the executive branch from doing anything too crazy. And then another legislative power is impeaching the president, which we saw with President Trump a few months ago. Okay, here's the executive branch. The executive branch is elected in a bizarre way that is only done by the United States. In fact, our system is so bizarre that no other country on the planet has anything like the Electoral College. As you know, and I'm not going to go into a ton of details, each state is given a number of electors. These electors then vote for president. So when you vote for president, you aren't voting for president, you're voting for someone who is then going to go vote for president. In most states, if you win the majority of the state, you get all the electors. So Wisconsin has 10 electoral votes. If you win the state of Wisconsin with 51% of the vote, you get all of our electors. Shoot, if there were 10 candidates and you got 11% and everyone else got 9 or less, you would get all the electors for the state of Wisconsin. So it's kind of a bizarre rule. Either way, the original intent of the Electoral College was to make it so that smart individuals would elect the president. The idea was you vote for electors who are then smart and vote for president. Today, electors pledge to vote for one candidate or the other, and it's a lot different than how the writers of the Constitution had imagined it. But it's what we have, and that's the way it works. Okay, powers of the president. Power has a lot of powers. The biggest ones, though, are signing and vetoing laws. So if a president does not sign a law, they veto it, the bill does not become a law. And in that case, Congress can go through all of its maneuverings, and then it doesn't become a law. Now, can they override a veto? Yes, but hard to do. You need 2/3 majority in both the House and the Senate. So that's why we think the president has a lot of power. The president can suggest laws, but like I said, they have to wait for a member of Congress to propose it. Also appoints people to various positions. So Supreme Court, cabinet members are all appointed by the president. And as I mentioned earlier, if you're the power of the president, you run the executive branch. Like you're the person ultimately in charge of the FBI, Food and Drug Administration, Justice Department, Social Security Administration. All these administrations are funneling back to the president. They're like the CEO of the United States. They may not make the rules. That may be done by the board being Congress, but you're the person executing thing day to day. Oh, and by the way, I was wrong. We have 8 members of the House in Wisconsin, and California has 53 members of the House. And that may change. We're doing a census right now, which is in the Constitution, and the census will redivide these electoral votes based on population. So, if New York declines in population relative to California, which it has been, that's going to change electoral votes. So we at one point had 13 electoral votes, and California only had 3. That was back in the 1850s. That obviously has changed. Okay, judicial branch. Judicial branch is pretty vaguely defined in the Constitution. They hear cases related to federal law or constitutional issues. They deal with cases between states. They try to resolve conflicts if states are fighting over water rights or trade or that kind of thing. They don't specify rules on judges very much. There's nothing that says you have to be a U.S. citizen, you have to be a U.S. citizen. Nothing that says you have to be a lawyer. There's nothing that says you have a lifetime appointment, even though that's been done by tradition. There's nothing that says the Supreme Court has to be 9 people. In fact, that's right now a big debate thing. Should the Democrats, if they take power in November, make the Supreme Court more people so they can pack it with Democrats? You may not like the idea, but it is within the Constitution to make the Supreme Court be 50 people or 4 people. Or you could say Supreme Court justices have to retire at the age of 50, whatever. So, yes, they established a Supreme Court. They established a federal court structure, but all of the rest of it is pretty much defined by federal law, which was done by Congress. And this is a picture of the Supreme Court, and this is an old picture of the Supreme Court, but several of these guys are still on there. Ruth Bader Ginsburg most recently passed away, and there's hearings on her replacement, potential replacement. Okay, so Constitution ratification. Ratification is the idea that you have to approve this Constitution. So the people at the convention are like, yeah, this is a good document. We think it has a lot of compromises. We think it has a lot of strengths. Yes, there is the flaw of allowing slavery to still exist, but you wouldn't have passed the Constitution without making that deal. People are flawed. People make mistakes. Fundamentally, lasted long enough. I think it established some basic rights. Anyway, Constitution ends up being signed 1787, September. Needed 9 of 13 states to ratify it. 9 of 13. Now, realistically, you needed all of them. Ratify means approve. So there's a group called the Federalists. The Federalists are people who really, really support the Constitution. These were all people at the Constitutional Convention. Hamilton, James Madison, John Jay, George Washington, all war veterans or politicians from the era, all had something to do with the Constitutional Conventions. In particular, Hamilton, Madison, and Jay will write what are called the Federalist Papers, which you're going to look at as a homework assignment. These Federalist Papers are an argument for the Constitution. And here's what they say. You can't have absolute liberty. The Constitution is going to have mechanisms to stop absolute liberty. No one thinks you should be able to do anything you want, anywhere you want, anytime you want. I have the liberty to kill people I don't like because I'm mad. You don't have absolute liberty. I want to pee in the corner. No, you can't do that. So they would say absolute liberty destroys liberty because people can't do some things they want if other people are doing everything they want. Unity is important. Having the states get together and be unified creates a whole bunch of good things for trade and money and redistributing things if you have to. So like if there's a hurricane, you can get help from one area and another. You get the idea. Checks exist. So there is a strong federal government, but there's a separation of powers. They point out different branches. Yes. Government eventually comes from, or fundamentally comes from, the people. So every single one of those things I mentioned before, ultimately people elected the representatives who then make decisions. So whether the president is elected by electors, the electors were elected by the people. If you're on the Supreme Court, you were approved to be on the Supreme Court by a person elected by fundamentally the people, and a Senate approves that we're elected fundamentally by the people because, anyway, you got the idea. Federalism allows the states to still have some powers. States still have state militias, eventually state national guards. States still have rights to control all sorts of laws about how things happen in the states. And states aren't going to fight. The federal government will come in and arbitrate or be an arbiter between conflicts. And trade is still encouraged between the states. So yes, good for the economy, giant free trade zone. Now, anti-federalists. There are people like, yeah, this is a bad idea. Some of them, Richard Henry Lee, that is one of the guys he was one of Washington's officers. You actually read about him in one of your DBQs. He was the one who talked about America being united. Patrick Henry, fiery Virginian. Generally, rural farmers tended to be opposed to the federal government because they're like, I don't need someone far away telling me what to do. Key points, and some of them are absolutely right. There was no Bill of Rights. So when I ask you about the Constitution, most of you'll say, right to free speech, right to not have quartering in homes. Yeah, that wasn't in the original Constitution. Those are the first 10 amendments of the Bill of Rights. So right to bear arms wasn't in the original Constitution. That gets added later. So this is a true complaint. Taxation is bad. If you have a strong federal government, they will be able to tax you. And that has tended to be true. Now, you can argue it's good or bad, but it does end up with more federal taxes. States will lose power. Yes, they will. Now, the Federalists will say it's a worthy sacrifice. If you're into your state and local control, you are going to lose power. It's too complicated. It is complicated. However, a simple government like a dictator, yeah, it's simple, but is it really good? Standing military is likely. You're going to have a standing military to keep order in a country that's this large. That actually doesn't really exist in the United States, a large standing military till after World War II. But yes, U.S. is too large. Yeah, they would say, yeah, each country or each state should be its own country because it'll make it easier to administer. And to a degree, that does make some sense. Think about the size of some European countries. Like the state of Maine is about the same size as Germany, and like Germany is its own country, actually, Maine and Vermont, I think. Anyway, it's done in secret, and guess what? The convention was done in secret. They actually closed the doors. They were locked in a room. It was hot in the summer of 1787. So no, it was not done publicly. Absolute power will corrupt. And could it? Could you end up with some people who are consolidating power? Some would say it already has corrupted. And then the Supreme Court will take out state courts. Yeah, we have state courts, but fundamentally, they still control things at the state level. I think this is probably a little blown out of proportion, but certainly sometimes state courts do lose if something gets appealed to the Supreme Court. So, but like I would argue, probably it's good. We would probably still have racial discrimination that was legally on the books in some states today if the Supreme Court hadn't stepped in. And I think most people would say, yeah, the Supreme Court should step in when states are making mistakes. Okay, so eventually, the two sides, Federalist and Anti-Federalist, battle, and we end up with the elections. We end up ratifying the Constitution in 1788. So New York ratifies it, and we have our first election in 1788. George Washington wins. He doesn't have a political party. The person in second place then becomes vice president. So John Adams becomes vice president. You're like, well, what? That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense, but that's how the Constitution was originally written. They said that the second place person gets to be VP. So you know who'd be VP right now? Hillary Clinton would be Donald Trump's vice president. Think about that. So that ends up getting changed in the Constitution super early. Okay, so Washington administration. What do they end up accomplishing in the Washington administration? Well, Washington is going to approve. They're going to approve the Bill of Rights. It's going to get ratified, I think, in 1791. The Bill of Rights is all those rights you tend to think about when you think about the Constitution. Trial by jury, no cruel, unusual punishment, right to bear arms. Anyway, that's a whole other thing we're not going to go into, but that does get passed. And that was a valid criticism the Anti-Federalists made. Judiciary Act will set up the Supreme Court with 13 district courts. There will be a Supreme Court, and then there's 13 district courts. The United States still has, we've changed the number of district courts. I'm actually not, I think we have 12 or 13 today. Anyway, each district deals with a part of the country. Obviously, that's spread out over time, but yeah, we still have districts that then appeal to the Supreme Court. We created an executive branch. There was almost nothing in the Constitution about how the executive branch should look. So originally, there are 5 members of a president's cabinet. They are the Secretary of State, and our first Secretary of State, chief diplomat, is Thomas Jefferson. Probably had more experience as a diplomat than anybody else in the country. He'd been to France, our biggest ally. Secretary of the Treasury is Alexander Hamilton, right here. Hamilton was a money guy. Like I said, he believes in strong central power, but he also believes in strong central power to protect the economy. Secretary of War is Henry Knox of Fort Knox fame. He had been an officer in Washington's military. Attorney General is the top lawyer carrying out federal laws. William Barr is our current Attorney General. And then finally, Postmaster General. I'm actually not sure who that was, but they end up running the post office, and that was a federal level cabinet position. Today, these top 4 are still in the cabinet. The Postmaster General is not. I think the post office has faded in terms of being a large government agency. Let's see here. What else was I going to say about this? Secretary of War is now called Secretary of Defense, but yeah, same idea. Okay. So, let me see here. All right. I am going to get to the rest of this later because it will make sense, and I've already given you enough stuff here. So that's it. That gives us at least a basis for things. All right. So see you.